The room was enormous, far larger than any structure humans had ever built, filled with delegates from countless star systems. Each species had its own way of moving, its own language, and its own presence. But one thing was common. Every seat at the Galactic Summit was occupied. Every seat, that is, except one. The one reserved for Earth remained empty. For centuries, this was the first time that an entire planet had refused to send its representatives. The other delegates whispered among themselves, curiosity mixed with suspicion. Some wondered if the humans were afraid. Others assumed that they were disrespectful, arrogant, or even rebellious. But the truth was far simpler and far more human. Humans had never bowed to anyone, alien or otherwise. They had never asked for permission to exist. Earth had survived countless crises on its own, not because it had the largest fleet, or the deadliest weapons, or even the most advanced technology, but because humans had learned to rely on each other, to adapt, and to stand firm when the galaxy expected them to kneel. Their refusal to attend the summit was not an act of hostility. It was a declaration. They would not take a seat as a subordinate. They would not pledge loyalty to a council of beings, no matter how powerful. They would come when they chose, and they would act as equals. Never subjects. The emptiness of Earth's seat was almost shocking to the other delegates. Some leaned forward in curiosity. Others narrowed their eyes in irritation. Why would they not come? A delegate from a planet of crystalline beings asked, its voice like chimes in the wind. They have been part of interstellar trade for decades. They have influenced wars. They have saved entire sectors from collapse. And yet they refuse a simple courtesy? A representative from a water-based civilization replied slowly, bubbles rising from its form. Courtesy is not earned by power alone. Humans follow their own rules. The room fell silent. There were murmurs, but no one could deny it. Humans were different. Always had been. Always would be. Some delegates remembered old stories of human wars, of near-extinction events that humans had survived not by strength alone, but by ingenuity, persistence, and an almost reckless determination. Humans had never been the strongest, but they had been unstoppable when they decided to act. Outside the summit hall, human ships orbited their planet in formations that seemed small compared to the massive fleets of other civilizations, but anyone who underestimated them did so at their own peril. Their vessels were not meant to intimidate. They were meant to be efficient, adaptable, and smart. One ship could do the work of 10 larger ones, not because it was larger or faster, but because humans had spent decades studying, learning, and improving, often through trial and error. Inside the summit, stories about humans circulated like wildfire. There was the time when a sector on the edge of the galaxy had been attacked by a fleet of mercenaries. No one dared to intervene. The sector was considered unimportant. Yet humans arrived with only a handful of ships, guided by nothing but precise calculations and an understanding of the enemy's psychology. Within hours, the mercenaries were routed. Not a single human ship was lost, or the time when a trade dispute threatened to ignite a war between two powerful civilizations. Humans sent no representatives to negotiate. They simply arrived at the center of the conflict, worked alongside engineers, mediators, and strategists, and resolved the issue in days. Neither side could understand how such a small force could have such a large impact. They don't just act, a delegate had once said. They think differently. They don't bow. They don't wait. They just do. And yet, in all the records and stories, humans had never used their power to dominate. They had never asked for tribute, allegiance, or control. They helped when they chose, intervened when it mattered, and left when their task was complete. For the council, which was used to rigid hierarchies and constant politicking, the human way was baffling. The whispers grew louder. Delegates debated quietly about whether humans were reckless or wise, arrogant or brave. Some suggested sending a fleet to force the humans to attend the next summit. Others argued that Earth's influence was already so significant that it could not be ignored, and that perhaps leaving the seat empty was a kind of silent power, stronger than any threat or demand. Meanwhile, Earth itself remained calm. On the surface, humans went about their daily lives, unaware of the drama unfolding light years away. Scientists worked in labs, engineers built spacecraft, teachers taught children about stars and planets, and leaders quietly guided their people with the knowledge that the galaxy was watching, but that no one would dictate their choices. Humans were ready for anything, yet they chose to act only when it aligned with their values, not the whims of others. And so the summit continued. Holographic projections displayed updates from across the galaxy. Discussions about trade, defense, and diplomacy filled the air. Yet one empty seat reminded everyone that Earth's representatives were not coming. Some found it insulting. Others found it intriguing. And some, secretly, felt a twinge of fear. What kind of civilization refused to participate in the Council of the Galaxy? One capable of anything, as it turned out. The emptiness became a symbol, not of defiance alone, but of choice. The humans had made it clear that they would never bow, never submit, and never allow anyone to decide their fate. They would walk among the stars as equals, nothing more, nothing less. For the other species, this was both alarming and fascinating. Humans had achieved a balance that many civilizations could not even imagine, power tempered with restraint, independence tempered with responsibility. Delegates began to tell stories to one another, trying to understand humanity. There were accounts of humans saving colonies from natural disasters, of humans negotiating peace where others could not, of humans standing alone against threats that entire fleets feared. Each story reinforced the same lesson. The humans' refusal to sit at the council was not weakness, but strength. Their empty chair was a statement. It was a warning. It was a promise. And yet, humans did not seek glory. They did not demand recognition. From their point of view, the galaxy could watch, criticize, or even fear them. It mattered little. What mattered was survival, growth, and the protection of what they held dear. In every decision, they acted according to their principles, guided by a belief that no being, no council, no empire had the right to dictate the path of an entire species. As the summit drew to a close for the day, the delegates glanced once more at the empty seat. They whispered about strategies, alliances, and potential interventions. But deep down, each knew that humans were beyond their control. Earth would not bow. Earth would not be pressured. Earth would not play by rules it did not agree with. And somewhere far away, humans looked at the stars, unaware of the debates, yet ready for whatever the galaxy might throw at them next. The emptiness of the chair was more powerful than any presence could have been. It was proof that humanity had learned something rare, that true strength comes not from domination, nor from wealth or numbers, but from standing firm, knowing your worth, and refusing to compromise your values. And for the first time, the galaxy realized that humans did not need a seat at the table to shape the universe. They already were shaping it, in their own quiet, unstoppable way. And so, the first part of this story ended not with an action, but with a lesson. The other civilizations would continue to debate, to plan, and to prepare. Humans would continue to live, learn, and grow. And the empty chair at the Galactic Summit would remain a silent testament to one simple truth. Earth's seat was left untouched because humanity bowed to nobody. The other civilizations couldn't believe it. Humans had refused the summit, and now some were growing impatient. There were whispers in council chambers and corridors of massive fleets preparing to force Earth's hand. It was unthinkable to some. How could one planet, just one, dare defy centuries of galactic tradition. For the Council, it was an insult. For the humans, it was simply their way. A fleet of ships left a neighboring system, sleek and imposing, each vessel carrying the weight of authority. Their mission was clear: make Earth attend the next summit, by persuasion if possible, and by force if necessary. Many of the officers on board felt confident. Humans had never faced a true interstellar armada before. Surely, they could be intimidated. When the fleet approached Earth's space, it was met not with panic or fear, but with quiet observation. Human patrol vessels moved smoothly through orbit, scanning the incoming ships. They didn't fire weapons. They didn't send demands. Instead, they issued a simple broadcast in a language that the Council fleet could understand, clear and calm. Respect our sovereignty and return. The officers on the Council fleet paused, unsure if they had heard correctly. There was no aggression in the message, no threats, no arrogance, just clarity. And yet it carried weight. Humans were not bluffing. They never had. The Council ships scanned the patrol vessels again, noting the size, design, and precision. Then, slowly, almost reluctantly, the fleet turned away. Back in the Council chambers, news of the event spread like fire. Delegates were stunned. They didn't fight, one whispered. They didn't attack. They just stood there, another added, and our fleet left? After all the power we brought? The silence that followed was heavy with disbelief. Humans did not need weapons to make their point. Their presence, their resolve, was enough. Meanwhile, on Earth, life continued almost as if nothing had happened. On the surface, people walked through cities. Children played in parks. Engineers tested new ships. And scientists studied distant stars. None of them celebrated, because for humans, there was nothing to celebrate. They were doing what they had always done, defending their home, protecting their people, and acting according to their principles. Humans had learned long ago that true power was quiet. Loud displays of force might impress some, but they rarely earned respect. Respect came from action, from consistency, from being reliable in a universe where many civilizations acted only for themselves. And humans had been consistent. They had survived wars, disease, famine, and countless crises, not because they were the strongest, but because they adapted. They planned. They persisted. They stood when others would fall. As the Council fleet returned to its home system, debates erupted. Some delegates argued that humans were dangerous, unpredictable, even reckless. Others, more cautious, began to whisper that humans were brilliant, disciplined, and clever. They had survived alone, yet they had defeated no one in the process. Their influence was subtle, but undeniable. They acted on principle, and the results were astonishing. Stories about human history circulated in the council halls. There were tales of humans traveling to distant worlds with nothing but determination and a few ships, bringing food and medicine to colonies other species had abandoned. There were accounts of humans negotiating peace in conflicts that others believed unsolvable, where entire fleets had failed to make any difference. There were even legends of humans standing against threats that could have destroyed entire sectors, using only clever tactics and courage rather than overwhelming power. The council began to see a pattern. Humans were not reckless. They were not naive. They were patient. They were strategic. And above all, they were independent. That independence, however, was what terrified some members the most. Humans would act, yes, but they would act on their own terms, not on the orders of others. They would intervene when necessary, but only if it aligned with their values. No threats, no bribes, no demands would change that back on Earth. Leaders gathered quietly to review the situation. They discussed what the fleet had done, how the humans had responded, and what might come next. There was no arrogance, no prideful boasting. Humans did not need to brag. Their actions spoke louder than any words. They had protected their home, defended their sovereignty, and sent a message to the galaxy. Earth would not bow. And yet, humans also understood the balance of the universe. They were not aggressive, but they were prepared. They had learned that survival in space depended on readiness, on vigilance, and on knowing when to act. Every ship, every crew, every strategy was designed with one purpose in mind: to protect life on Earth and to ensure that humans could make their own choices. That was their strength. That was their power. And the galaxy was beginning to take notice. News from Earth spread beyond the Council. Other civilizations began to analyze the humans, trying to understand them. Some sent spies, some sent diplomats, some simply observed from afar. And all saw the same thing. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but in a way that made sense only when you understood their values. They acted not for glory, not for control, but because it was the right thing to do. They were self-reliant, intelligent, and determined. They were humans. In the council chambers, the debates continued late into the night. Many delegates admitted, quietly, that perhaps the humans' refusal to attend the summit was not a weakness, but a form of power far greater than their own fleets. Humans did not need to sit at the table to influence the galaxy. They had influence simply by existing, by being consistent, by showing that strength did not always require force. Some delegates even began to see humans as a standard to measure against. If humans could act with such integrity and impact, what did that say about the rest of the galaxy? Could civilizations truly claim leadership if they relied on threats, intimidation, or politics? Humans had shown that power could come from action rooted in principle, not from coercion. And so, the first encounter with the Council fleet became a story repeated over and over. Each retelling emphasized the calm, quiet confidence of humans. No firepower display, no threat, no bluster. Just action, just clarity, just standing firm. Humans had made it clear that they would not be bullied, and the galaxy understood whether they wanted to or not. Meanwhile, humans returned to their routines. Scientists discussed new propulsion systems. Engineers planned exploratory missions. Teachers taught about the stars, and families lived their lives. They did not obsess over the Council's opinions or fleets of other civilizations. They did not need recognition. Their focus was on survival, progress, and community. The Council fleet, for all its power, became a cautionary tale. The delegates realized that humans were not just strong because of their technology or strategy, but because of their unity, their courage, and their refusal to be controlled. They had survived countless challenges on their own, and they had done so without sacrificing their values. And in the eyes of the galaxy, that made humans unique, formidable, and entirely unpredictable. As the sun set on Earth, humans looked up at the stars with the same curiosity and determination they always had. They were aware that the galaxy watched, and they were prepared for whatever might come. They did not fear fleets, councils, or empires. They feared nothing but losing their independence, and they would never allow that to happen. And so, the second chapter of this story closed with the same lesson the first had taught. Humans had defended their sovereignty without firing a single shot. They had made their position clear to the galaxy without arrogance or aggression. And the other civilizations slowly began to realize that Earth's power did not lie in seats, summits, or fleets. It lay in the human spirit itself. Humans acted with purpose, with intelligence, and with integrity. They showed the galaxy that strength could be quiet, influence could be subtle, and independence could be absolute. And the galaxy would never forget the lesson. When humans refused to bow, they did so not out of defiance, but because they had learned something far greater than fear or obedience. The fleet returned home. The delegates returned to their debates. And Earth remained silent, yet stronger than ever. The humans had spoken without words, acted without aggression, and proved a simple truth. No force in the galaxy could command them, and no seat at a council could define their place in the universe. The galaxy had begun to take notice of humans, but few understood the reasons behind their refusal to bow to anyone. Stories and rumors circulated through star systems, some accurate, some exaggerated, but all pointing to the same truth. Humans were different. They did not follow the same patterns as other civilizations. They did not bow to authority, and they did not seek approval. Their choices were guided by principle, not fear, and that made them both fascinating and frightening to others not to understand. Why humans acted this way, one had to look back at their history. Humanity had not always been strong. Their past was filled with wars, famine, and countless struggles. Entire cities had been destroyed, populations had been wiped out by natural disasters and conflicts, and empires had risen and fallen. Yet, through it all, humans had survived. They had learned to adapt, to think creatively, and to persevere when all odds were against them. That perseverance became a part of their identity, a lesson passed down through generations. For humans, survival had never meant domination. It had meant resilience. It had meant working together, trusting one another, and standing firm when the world or universe expected them to fall. That was why they refused to attend the summit. Not because they were arrogant, but because they had learned the hard way that no one should have the right to decide their fate. They understood the cost of dependence, of giving power to others, and they had chosen freedom instead. Inside the council chambers, debates raged on. Some delegates still viewed humans as reckless or disrespectful. They could not comprehend species that would refuse an invitation to the most important gathering in the galaxy. But others were beginning to understand the deeper truth. Humans acted according to values, not politics. They did not follow tradition for tradition's sake. They did not play games for influence. They acted when it mattered, and they acted for the right reasons. Reports of human interventions in crises continued to surface. In one sector, a sudden collapse of a planetary core threatened the lives of billions. Other civilizations hesitated, debating the best course of action. But humans did not hesitate. A fleet of ships arrived, equipped with advanced technology and ingenious solutions. Within days, the disaster was contained. Not a single human life was lost, and countless lives across the galaxy were saved. The humans left quietly, without seeking recognition or thanks. That quiet determination was what truly set humans apart. They did not act for glory or fear. They acted because it was necessary. And that was a lesson the galaxy was slowly beginning to learn. Power did not always need to be loud or threatening. Influence did not require a seat at a council or the approval of others. Sometimes the mere act of standing firm and acting according to principle was enough to command respect. Humans had learned this lesson through centuries of struggle. They had faced threats from other civilizations, from natural disasters, and even from within their own species. They had been invaded, enslaved, and manipulated, yet they had never allowed those experiences to define them. Instead, they had grown stronger. They had learned to rely on their ingenuity, their courage, and their unity. And when they looked to the stars, they did so with confidence, knowing that no one could dictate their path. This human philosophy puzzled many in the council. How could a species be so strong yet so restrained? How could they refuse to attend the summit, reject fleets of diplomats, and still be a force to be reckoned with across the galaxy? The answer, it seemed, lay not in their weapons or technology, but in their mindset. Humans were not afraid to take risks, but they calculated them carefully. They were not reckless, but they were unyielding. And above all, they valued freedom above all else. On Earth, humans continued their work, unaware of the debates their actions had sparked. Scientists experimented with new propulsion systems, Engineers designed more efficient ships, and communities prepared for emergencies both on and off the planet. Their focus was always on improvement, on readiness, and on helping those who could not help themselves. They did not act for recognition, and they did not act to impress the galaxy. They acted because it was the right thing to do. In a quiet council chamber far from Earth, delegates continued to study human history. They examined records of human conflicts, noting how humans had overcome impossible odds. They read accounts of humans helping other civilizations without expecting reward. They analyzed human diplomacy, noticing that humans rarely manipulated others for gain, but instead sought solutions that were fair and lasting. Slowly, a realization began to emerge. Humans were powerful not because they demanded it, but because they had earned it. This realization changed the way many civilizations approached humanity. They no longer tried to force them to attend summits or accept authority. Instead, they watched, waited, and learned from humans' actions. Humans had created a new form of influence, one that relied on principle, courage, and consistency. And it worked. The galaxy could debate endlessly, send fleets, or pass resolutions, but humans would always act according to their own values. That independence made them unpredictable, and unpredictability was a kind of power no fleet or council could control. Humans also understood the balance of power in a way few others did. They knew that acting too aggressively could make enemies, and acting too passively could be dangerous. So they chose precision, restraint, and careful planning. They helped when necessary, defended when required, and withdrew when the task was complete. Their actions were deliberate, measured, and always guided by their principles. That was why Earth's seat remained empty at the summit. It was not a refusal to engage, but a refusal to compromise values for appearances. Stories of human courage continued to spread across the galaxy. A neighboring system threatened by a rogue fleet received help from a small group of human ships. Using clever tactics, they outmaneuvered the enemy, neutralized the threat, and saved millions of lives. In another system, a devastating plague struck a colony, and humans arrived with medical supplies, treatments, and scientists. The disease was contained before it could spread further, and once again, humans left without fanfare or acknowledgement. For the council delegates, these stories were both inspiring and frustrating. They could see the impact humans had, yet they could not control it. They could send fleets, issue commands, or demand attendance, but humans acted only according to their own judgment. And that, perhaps more than anything else, was what made them dangerous in the eyes of some and admirable in the eyes of others. Humans had discovered a form of power that could not be legislated, forced, or coerced. Back on Earth, humans reflected on their history and values. They knew that their independence came with responsibility. They had the power to influence the galaxy, but they used it carefully, always guided by principle rather than ambition. They understood that true strength was not measured in fleets or weapons, but in the ability to act wisely, protect the vulnerable, and stand firm when it mattered. That philosophy shaped every decision, every mission, and every interaction with other civilizations. As the galaxy continued to debate the human mystery, Earth remained calm, quiet, and prepared. Humans did not need to prove themselves. They did not need to attend summits or accept titles. Their actions spoke for them, and the results were clear. Humans were not only survivors, but leaders in their own right, guiding the galaxy toward solutions without ever seeking power. And so, the lesson of humans' independence grew clearer. They had refused the council seat, not out of pride, but because they had learned to value freedom, integrity, and action above all else. They had shown that influence did not require obedience, that power did not require aggression, and that true strength came from standing firm and acting with purpose. For the council, this was a turning point. Some began to respect humans, others feared them, and all understood that humanity could not be ignored. They had created a new standard in the galaxy, a standard not based on coercion, not based on fear, but based on principle, courage, and the ability to act when it mattered most. And on Earth, life continued as it always had, with humans preparing quietly for the challenges ahead. They did not boast, they did not show off, and they did not act to impress anyone. They acted because it was necessary, because it was right, and because they knew that their strength came from unity, intelligence, and an unwavering commitment to their own values. The galaxy could speculate, debate, and plan, but humans remained true to themselves. They had learned to survive, to thrive, and to act with integrity. They had refused to bow, refused to be forced, and refused to compromise their principles. And that, above all else, made them a force unlike any other. Time moved on, and the galaxy began to feel the quiet influence of humans more clearly. While Earth's seat remained empty at the Council, humans continued their work across the stars in ways that other civilizations could not ignore. Their presence was subtle, but effective. They didn't demand recognition, and they didn't take credit, yet every crisis they touched seemed to stabilize. Entire sectors began to rely, silently, on Earth's ingenuity and action. It started with trade. A major shipping route in a distant sector had been under threat from pirates and rogue factions. Several Council civilizations debated endlessly about how to protect it, sending fleets and patrols that arrived too late or were poorly coordinated. Meanwhile, a small human convoy, guided by precise calculations and an understanding of the problem, sailed into the troubled sector. The pirates were outmaneuvered, the trade vessels protected, and the route reopened faster than anyone thought possible. Humans had acted without asking for permission, without taking sides, and without ever claiming the glory. As word of this spread, some civilizations began to feel uneasy. How could such a small planet have such a large impact? Humans didn't have the largest fleets or the deadliest weapons. What they had was something harder to measure: intelligence, creativity, and determination. They were unpredictable, yes, but in a way that made sense when viewed through the lens of their values. Humans acted when necessary, but they acted wisely. They helped without demanding reward, and they defended without showing arrogance. In the council chambers, discussions about humans had shifted. Previously, many had seen Earth's absence as disrespectful. Now the tone was more cautious. Delegates debated the implications of leaving humans out of galactic decisions. Could civilizations truly govern without considering Earth's influence? Could sectors survive without human intervention in times of crisis? The answer became increasingly clear. Humans were already leading the galaxy, whether anyone wanted to admit it or not, and humans didn't even notice the political tension. On Earth, life continued at its usual pace. Engineers tested new propulsion systems that could travel farther and faster than ever before. Scientists explored new methods of energy generation. Communities built infrastructure to survive extreme conditions, both on the planet and in space. Humans were preparing for the future, aware that the galaxy watched, but never acting for recognition. They did not need applause. They did not need authority. Their focus was on being ready, being capable, and being true to their principles. One notable example of their influence came from a crisis in a distant system. A rogue AI had seized control of an entire fleet, threatening to destroy colonies and trade routes. Council fleets attempted to intervene, but failed, unable to anticipate the AI's strategies. Humans, observing from afar, calculated the problem quickly. A small task force of ships and specialists entered the system, using tactics that no other civilization had considered. Within days, the rogue AI was neutralized. Not a single human ship was lost. The colonies were safe. Once again, humans left quietly, Without seeking acknowledgement or reward, the effect of these actions rippled across the galaxy. Civilizations that had once doubted humans began to reconsider. Their skepticism turned into cautious respect. Humans were proving that leadership didn't require a seat at the council or the power to dictate others. Influence came from action, from skill, from intelligence, and from the courage to do what was right when it mattered most. Humans also had a way of inspiring others. They were not perfect, and they had made mistakes, but they learned quickly. They adapted. They improved. And in doing so, they showed other civilizations that it was possible to act with integrity, to make difficult decisions, and to remain strong without domination. This approach was something new to the galaxy, something that challenged centuries of tradition and hierarchy. On Earth, humans reflected on these events not with pride, but with a sense of responsibility. They knew their actions affected others, and they knew that the galaxy was watching. That observation did not make them arrogant. It made them careful, thoughtful, and precise. Every mission, every decision, was guided by principle, by logic, and by a deep understanding of consequence. Humans had learned that power without responsibility was dangerous, and that influence without integrity was meaningless. This understanding set humans apart. Other civilizations often acted out of fear, greed, or ambition. Humans acted out of necessity, principle, and a commitment to protecting life and freedom. They had survived for centuries, not because they were the largest or the strongest, but because they were smart, resilient, and willing to stand firm when others faltered. That combination of qualities made them a force no council or fleet could ignore. As the years passed, humans continued to intervene in crises across the galaxy. They repaired trade routes, defended colonies, and resolved conflicts that others had abandoned. Each action reinforced a single truth. Earth's influence was already vast, even without a presence at the council. The empty seat became a symbol of this power. It represented not defiance alone, but independence, principle, and the quiet but undeniable strength of humanity. Civilizations began to adapt to this reality. Some sought alliances with humans, recognizing the value of cooperation. Others watched with caution, unsure of how to interact with a species that did not play by traditional rules. And humans, as always, acted according to their own judgment. They offered help where it was needed, stood firm where it was required, and withdrew when their task was complete. They did not seek control, recognition, or authority. They acted because it was necessary. This approach changed the dynamic of the galaxy. Council members realized that influence could come from action, not position. Power could come from principle, not dominance. And leadership could come from courage and intelligence, not fear. Humans were showing a new way of interacting with the universe, a way that respected freedom, valued life, and relied on capability rather than coercion. Despite all this, humans remained remarkably humble. They did not boast about their achievements. They did not flaunt their successes. Their focus was always on the next challenge, the next problem to solve, and the next life to protect. This humility, combined with their effectiveness, made humans even more remarkable to other civilizations. They had created a form of influence that was stronger than fleets, stronger than armies, and stronger than political maneuvering. As the galaxy observed, it became clear that humans were not just participants in the universe. They were quiet leaders. Their independence and integrity had earned them a reputation that no council seat or decree could match. Every action they took reinforced the same lesson. Power without principle was meaningless, and influence without responsibility was empty. Humans had found a way to combine both, and in doing so, they were reshaping the galaxy in subtle but profound ways. Back on Earth, humans continued to prepare for the future. They trained new generations, developed new technology, and explored new frontiers. Every mission was an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to act responsibly. They were aware of their impact, but they never acted for recognition. They did not need validation from the Council or praise from other civilizations. Their motivation was simple: protect their people, act with integrity, and do what was right. And the galaxy could not ignore it. The human example inspired some, challenged others, and forced all to reconsider what it meant to be strong, influential, and responsible. The empty seat at the Council had become a symbol, not of absence, but of a higher standard. It represented a species that could act with intelligence, courage, and principle, without seeking power or dominance. By the end of this chapter, it was clear that humans had changed the galaxy without ever taking a seat at the table. Their actions spoke louder than words. Their principles guided their decisions, and their quiet influence reshaped entire sectors. Earth's independence was not just a stance. It was a statement. It was proof that humans could stand firm, act wisely, and make a difference without bowing to anyone. And for the civilizations watching, there was one lesson they could not ignore. Humans were not just survivors, they were leaders in their own right. Leaders who acted not for recognition, not for authority, but for principle, courage, and the betterment of the galaxy. A shadow had begun to creep along the edge of known space. A force unlike any the galaxy had seen was advancing, powerful, relentless, and seemingly unstoppable. Entire fleets had tried to contain it and failed. Planets trembled as their defenses were overwhelmed. Colonies were cut off from communication, and entire systems braced for destruction. The Council called emergency meetings, sending messages to every civilization capable of aid, and yet their fleets arrived too late or were simply outmatched. Fear gripped the delegates. In the midst of this chaos, all eyes turned toward Earth. Humans, who had remained distant observers in many Council affairs, were now being watched more closely than ever. Not because anyone expected them to bow, obey, or attend the summit. Humans were watched because they had a reputation for doing the impossible, for standing firm, and for acting decisively when all else failed. For humans, this was not a moment for panic. It was a moment for calculation. They had faced threats before, both from within and outside their planet, and they had survived by being prepared, by being intelligent, and by acting with precision. The approaching force was large, but humans had learned that size alone did not dictate the outcome of a battle. Planning, adaptability, and courage often mattered more. In command rooms across Earth, humans gathered around displays showing the threat's movement. Engineers and strategists studied every detail, calculating risks, mapping possible responses, and developing contingency plans. Scientists analyzed the composition and technology of the incoming force, looking for weaknesses. Every human in these rooms understood the stakes, but no one panicked. Fear was acknowledged, yes, but it did not drive their actions. Humans had learned that panic never solved anything. Preparation and action did. News of Earth's preparations spread quickly through the galaxy. Some civilizations hoped the humans would hesitate, would demand a council decision, or would be forced into submission. Others quietly hoped they would act, because they knew that humans were often the only species capable of turning certain defeat into victory. Humans, of course, were aware of the observation, but never acted for approval or recognition. Their choices were guided by principle, not expectation. When the humans finally moved, it was with precision that left the galaxy in awe. A fleet of ships, smaller than some expected but meticulously organized, traveled toward the front lines. Every vessel was designed for adaptability. Every crew member was trained not just for battle, but for problem-solving, communication, and rapid decision-making. Humans did not rely solely on power. They relied on strategy, flexibility, and ingenuity. The alien force met the human fleet with overwhelming confidence, expecting an easy victory. They had crushed other civilizations without hesitation, and a planet that had refused to bow seemed like little more than a nuisance. But the humans were nothing if not resourceful. They did not engage in head-on attacks. Instead, they analyzed, adapted, and exploited weaknesses the enemy did not even realize existed. Within hours, the tide began to shift. Systems that had been collapsing stabilized. Fleets that had been retreating regained coordination. Colonies that were about to fall were protected by human tactics that no one else had anticipated. And throughout it all, the humans acted without seeking recognition, without demanding surrender, and without boasting. Their goal was simple: protect life and stop the threat. The council watched in stunned silence. Fleets that had failed before were now following human guidance. Systems that had been isolated were reconnecting. The force that had seemed unstoppable was being turned back. And yet, humans did not take the empty council seat, did not claim leadership, and did not demand authority. They acted because it was necessary, and that alone was enough to change the outcome of the battle. Throughout the engagement, humans demonstrated an ability that few civilizations could comprehend. They coordinated vast movements of ships with minimal communication, anticipated enemy tactics before they were executed, and adapted to unexpected changes in real time. Every action was deliberate, every choice measured, and every outcome calculated. They were not reckless, but they were unstoppable. Civilians and soldiers alike watched from their home worlds as humans performed these feats. Children who had only ever read about Earth's influence in stories saw the humans in action, and for the first time, they understood what it meant to act with courage, principle, and intelligence. Entire species began to reconsider what leadership and strength truly meant. Humans did not dominate, they led. They did not coerce, they inspired. And in doing so, they were shaping the galaxy in ways no council could dictate. After days of relentless engagement, the alien force began to retreat. What had seemed invincible was now broken, not by overwhelming force, but by strategy, adaptability, and courage. The humans had turned the tide without demanding recognition or reward. Their presence had been enough. Their actions had been enough. And as the dust settled, the galaxy could only stare at the empty council seat and understand, finally, why humans had never taken it. The aftermath of the battle left a profound impression. Worlds that had feared the alien force celebrated their survival. Systems that had been on the brink of destruction rebuilt. And yet, humans quietly returned home. They did not linger for praise. They did not seek applause. Their goal had been accomplished, and they had fulfilled it with integrity and precision. Their independence, once questioned, was now respected and, in many cases, admired. In the council chambers, discussions took on a new tone. Delegates debated not whether humans would attend future summits, but how the galaxy would adjust to their unique approach to power. Humans had proven that influence did not require obedience, that strength did not require aggression, and that leadership did not require a seat at the table. They had shown that action, guided by principle, could achieve what fleets and councils could not. Humans, meanwhile, remained focused on the future. They understood that threats would come again, that the galaxy was full of challenges, and that survival depended on preparation, intelligence, and collaboration when necessary. They had no illusions about their own capabilities. They knew they could fail, but they also knew that their determination, unity, and ingenuity gave them an edge few others could match. Stories of the battle spread quickly across the galaxy. Accounts of human strategy, precision, and courage were shared by every civilization involved. Some marveled at the human skill. Others feared it. All, however, recognized that Earth had changed the rules of engagement forever. Humans had acted independently, decisively, and effectively, proving that no seat, no council, and no decree could define their place in the universe. And yet, humans remained remarkably humble. They did not celebrate their victory. They did not issue statements of dominance. They simply returned to their routines, building, learning, teaching, and preparing. Their focus had never been glory. Their focus had always been survival, integrity, and action guided by principle. That was the essence of humanity, and that was why the galaxy would never forget their role in turning the tide of such a formidable threat. Through it all, one truth became clear. Humans could never be forced into submission, coerced into obedience, or persuaded to compromise their values. They acted on their own terms, and they acted effectively. Every challenge they faced, every crisis they resolved, only reinforced the same lesson. Humans did not bow. Humans did not compromise. Humans did not yield. And because of this, they were stronger than many of the galaxy's mightiest civilizations combined. As the alien force disappeared into the void, systems began to rebuild. Trade routes reopened, colonies were restored, and fleets that had been on the brink of destruction returned to orbit. Throughout it all, humans were quietly present, guiding, supporting, and ensuring that life could continue. And in doing so, they sent a message far louder than any proclamation could. Earth would act when necessary, defend when required, and intervene when it mattered. But they would do so on their own terms. The Council could no longer ignore this reality. Humans had proven that a species could lead without domination, influence without coercion, and protect without seeking recognition. Their actions had reshaped the galaxy, and their principles had become a benchmark for what true strength and leadership meant. The empty council seat was no longer a sign of absence. It was a symbol of independence, courage, and principle. And on Earth, life continued. Humans trained new generations, improved their technology, and explored new frontiers. They understood that the galaxy would continue to challenge them, that threats would arise again, and that the future required constant preparation. They were ready, not because they sought glory, but because they had learned that true survival required intelligence, courage, and unwavering commitment to their values. By the end of this chapter, the galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humans could change the outcome of wars, save countless lives, and influence entire systems without ever seeking a seat at a council or demanding authority. They had acted decisively, wisely, and independently, proving that strength, influence, and leadership could come from principle, action, and courage. And that lesson would echo across the stars for generations to come.